So, continuing our series on praying in the supernatural. So, understanding the sovereignty of God, we've gone through this many times. He works through a person according to the power that works in us, the sovereignty of God. He adds his super to your natural to make the supernatural. It's always God's will to heal, and therefore we should have confidence. Can I pray for you? Because He's already deposited, okay, His super in us. So, we're teaching to pray like a doctor, ask a patient history, ask questions, speak into the issue, and take authority and command healing. And, we're praying a few weeks ago for Rocco, and this woman was praying that had a daughter that was the same, that wasn't verbalizing, and she was taking authority. And I loved the way she was praying. She said, "Allow the consonants to form and the vowels to form," and she was using her knowledge of the authority and telling it to come on. And I love that type of prayer that you're using it constructively. And pray again, don't give up, do checkups. Well, if no improvement, okay, consider a blockage. And we looked at Henry Wright, that he found that in his study, even churches that believed in divine healing typically only found 5% of the people were actually healed. And there could be blockages. And the first one to look at, am I the blockage? Okay. Asking God, for healing when God's already done it. There are many things we looked at that we say, God, do this, but He's already done it. God's already provided the healing. And so, first of all, it's a lack of faith. We're not using our commands. And so we're the blockage in that case, rather than saying, I've got the authority, God, thank you for that. Then I command these bones to heal. I command whatever it is, the consonants and the vowels to form. So, as I said, don't keep asking God for what He's already done. He's already provided the super. Oh, I spelled Peter wrong down there. And it says, by His stripes, um, whose stripes you were healed, past tense. Okay? So use your authority to release the healing. The healing was done, okay? And it was complete on the cross. And so we can be the blockage, and we've got to get rid of that blockage before we look at other blockages. Well, then we're also looking at now an introduction last week of legal rights that supersede authority. Now, we've been given authority, but Satan understands the spiritual realm, and he's a lawyer, and we give Satan legal access to the doors of our lives to attack us. And we look at that, and briefly we look at in A Point with God, the 6 main emotional roots over the last few weeks. And there's 3 I've picked out of that 16: fear, heaviness, and jealousy. Anger is probably the most likely one of there we're going to talk about. Now, let's look at some of the diseases that Henry Wright associates with fear: allergies, Alzheimer's, asthma, acid reflux, anemia, acne. Now, can you notice a pattern there? They're all starting with A. And the answer, or the thing I want to point out, is I've only done the A's. I haven't done B, C, D, E. And fear is the most common thing I find when I'm coming and praying for people with sickness, that 30, 40, 50% is fear. Now, you might call it worry, anxiety, or stress, but it's an aspect of fear. And so we want to look at some of these things and how the mechanisms of emotions, and you can recognize that and then learn to pray into that. So let's look at diseases of fear. And I've always said don't pray for the fruit. So don't pray for allergies or diabetes or fibromyalgia or glandular fever or high blood pressure. They're the fruit. We've got to make sure that we look at fear, and I want to be, can I distinguish with what type of fear? Fear of failure, fear of the future, fear of abandonment, fear of not being safe. And there's actually many types of fear. Because, you know, if I wanted to stop the fruit and I just pick all the fruit off the tree, what would happen? The fruit would come back next year. And if I chop the stump down and leave a stump, it might grow again. And so we have to make sure what are the real causes. And I've seen this with cancers and other things. People have been healed of cancer, and that cancer comes back because the real cause of the cancer was never dealt with. So these are some of the actions. Fear is designed, God has designed fight or flight. And these are our actions. But what if these are turned on and we're always in fear and we're always fighting? Well, if we're always fighting, we become angry, and then we can allow a spirit of jealousy. If we're always in flight, we're going for escape, and we can allow a spirit of heaviness or other things. And of course, there's natural fears, okay? But when that's over, it turns off. If I allow fear to be continually in me, I can have a spirit of fear. And fear grows. You can have something to be afraid of, and then you can even go to the perceived fear. There's no fear there, but you're always fearing. OCD is always fearing that they've left the taps on, that they haven't locked the door, and they've got to go back and check. And so there's perceived fears where there's not even real fear, and that is developing that spirit of fear when people become paranoid about particular things. Well, fear can be the root cause of disease, and that's what we're going to start looking at it. For as he thinks in his heart, the Bible says, so is he. And our thoughts control our biochemistry. It's called the cortisol drip. And we've got to look at and understanding how God designed us, and that actually helps us to pray. So the natural effect of fear, the adrenal cortex produces cortisol in response to fear, worry, and stress. It suppresses the immune system. And, the cortisol is to help you in that short-term moment that you need to fight and win a battle. And then you've won the battle and calm down and the cortisol can stop. Or you've got to run away, and you might spend half an hour running, and then you calm down. And what the body does, it's saying, well, I don't really need the immune system, or I don't need the digestive system. I've got to concentrate everything in my muscles. And that's what the body is doing. Now, really what's happening is your body is getting an injection of a chemical, just like you would go to the pharmacy and take cortisol as a tablet. And if you do that, you're saying, this will do this, but there are side effects. And the side effects from cortisol is it can destroy the T cells that fight cancer. So there are two things when I pray for people with cancer. The first one is there's trauma, which is the first thing that caused the bones to be suppressed. But then there's fear. The first thing the doctor says is, you're going to die. Well, that's created fear, or there's no cure from your disease. And then another effect, the B cells, okay, it encourages them and it creates antibodies, and these cause other things like allergies. This cortisol drip is a major pathway to fear diseases. Well, we're going to continue, and over the next few weeks, I want to look at how fear, so this store of emotions and fear, is opening and how we can pray for people with allergies.